The chandeliers in Bellini's fine dining establishment cast a dazzling, prismatic light across the faces of San Francisco's elite, their laughter echoing over champagne flutes as they remained blissfully unaware of the intricate power dynamics playing out around them. In a secluded corner booth sat Maxwell Gallo, his mere presence demanding attention without a single word uttered. His cold, blue eyes surveyed his surroundings with the predatory gaze of a hunter watching its prey. Beside him, a small boy with sandy blonde hair and eyes that mirrored his father's piercing intensity sat perfectly still. His hands were neatly folded in his lap, and the waitstaff moved around him as if he were completely invisible. The boy's eyes followed every movement with an intelligence that far exceeded his 7 years. Yet no one seemed to notice or bother to acknowledge him directly. Audrey Bennett wiped the beads of condensation from her brow as she carefully balanced 3 plates of lobster risotto. This was her 3rd double shift of the week, and it was starting to wear down her usually cheerful disposition. Her nursing school textbooks felt heavy in her locker, a constant reminder of the dreams she'd had to defer due to mounting medical bills and a sister who depended on her. The restaurant manager pulled her aside, a barely concealed tremor in his voice as he nervously pointed towards the corner booth with a flick of his wrist. "That's Maxwell Gallo." "Yes, the Maxwell Gallo. And his son," he whispered urgently, his eyes darting around as if the mere mention of his name might conjure unwanted attention. Every server is terrified to approach their table. The last one who displeased them found himself unemployed the very next day. He continued, compulsively straightening his tie. "You're new enough that I can blame any mistakes on inexperience. So you're up, Bennett." Audrey approached the table with professional poise, noticing how the other patrons subtly shifted away from the powerful man's sphere of influence, like planets responding to an immense gravitational force. Maxwell barely acknowledged her, offering only a curt nod as he barked orders into his phone. His impeccably tailored Italian suit couldn't conceal the unyielding resolve that had forged his formidable empire. The boy looked up at Audrey with startling intensity, his gaze a mixture of hope and resignation, as if he were accustomed to disappointment. When she placed his dessert before him, he didn't reach for a spoon, and his father impatiently tapped the table before returning to his call. Audrey noticed the slight tilt of the boy's head as he watched her lips, a gesture she immediately recognized from her years volunteering at her sister's school for the deaf. With the father momentarily distracted, she set down her tray and signed with practiced fluidity. "Hello, my name is Audrey. What's your name?" The boy's eyes widened with shocked delight, his hands responding quickly with eager movements that seemed to pour out in a rush of relief. "I'm Charlie," he signed back, his previously rigid posture melting into animated expression. "Nobody ever talks to me here." Maxwell Gallo's phone call ended abruptly as he registered the exchange, his gaze hardening as it shifted between the waitress and his son with dangerous curiosity. The ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade as he assessed the woman who had breached an invisible boundary, his expression unreadable. "You know sign language," he stated rather than asked, his voice carrying the quiet menace of a man unaccustomed to surprises. "Where did you learn it?" His fingers drummed once on the polished table, a habit that his associates recognized as preceding either great generosity or swift retribution. Audrey maintained eye contact despite the flutter of warning in her chest, telling her to look away from those predatory eyes. "My younger sister was born deaf," she replied with quiet dignity. "I learned so she would never feel alone in her own home." Charlie's hands moved rapidly, his expression animated as he signed to his father, who watched with an intensity that made the surrounding tables grow even quieter. Maxwell's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, something calculating replacing his initial suspicion. "It appears my son would like you to teach him the proper way to order chocolate cake," Maxwell said with a dangerous smile that never reached his eyes. "He says the staff usually guess what he wants because they don't bother to understand him." Audrey knelt to Charlie's eye level, ignoring the sharp inhale from a nearby server who clearly thought the gesture too familiar. She signed and spoke simultaneously. "Would you like to learn how to order dessert?" The boy's enthusiastic nod loosened something tight in her chest. The next evening, Maxwell Gallo returned to Bellini's with Charlie in tow, requesting Audrey's section with a directness that the manager couldn't refuse. The formidable reputation that preceded the man had the kitchen staff preparing his usual order before he even sat down. Charlie waved excitedly when he spotted Audrey, his hands already forming questions about her day and whether she remembered him. The transformation in the boy was remarkable. Gone was the statue-still child, replaced by an expressive, eager 7-year-old bursting to communicate. Maxwell observed their interaction with inscrutable focus, his usual phone calls and business discussions set aside for once, as he watched his son bloom under the attention of someone who spoke his language. His gaze followed Audrey's hands as she signed, clearly assessing her every movement. "My son's mother died when he was 2, Maxwell stated without preamble when Audrey brought their appetizers, his tone matter-of-fact, but his eyes never leaving her face. She was the only one who knew how to speak to him properly. Audrey felt the weight of unspoken history in his words as Charlie attentively watched their lips. "Communication is a bridge," she responded carefully, sensing dangerous waters beneath this conversation. "Everyone deserves to have that bridge to others. Charlie has tutors, expensive ones," Maxwell continued, a hint of defensiveness in his otherwise controlled tone. "They teach him to read lips and speak, but none of them bothered to learn how he naturally communicates." His jaw tightened momentarily, revealing a flash of something raw beneath his composed exterior. The restaurant hummed with subdued conversation around them, but at their table, a silent understanding was forming through glances and the graceful movements of hands. Charlie demonstrated the signs he knew, his face lighting up each time Audrey responded in kind. "He's smart," Audrey observed, unable to keep the warmth from her voice as Charlie correctly signed a complex sentence. "He's probably been teaching himself from books or videos since his environment doesn't reinforce it." Maxwell's expression darkened momentarily, a shadow passing across his features before he quickly regained control. "In my world, any perceived vulnerability can lead to severe consequences," he said in a low voice meant only for her. "I've been trying to protect him from that reality." Charlie tugged at Audrey's sleeve, signing a question about the specials with such enthusiasm that she couldn't help but smile. The boy had clearly been starved for meaningful interaction, soaking up attention like parched earth receives rain. "Sometimes strength looks different than we expect," Audrey replied, her gaze steady despite the flutter of warning in her chest. "Your son has been navigating a world not built for him, that requires its own kind of power." Maxwell studied her for a long moment, something calculating yet curious in his gaze. "My driver will bring you to my home tomorrow evening at 7, he stated, the phrasing making it clear this was not a request. "You'll be compensated generously for teaching my son." "I have another job in school," Audrey countered, surprised by her own boldness in the face of a man who wasn't accustomed to refusal. "I can't simply abandon my responsibilities." Her heartbeat quickened as his expression hardened slightly. Maxwell removed a business card from his jacket and wrote something on the back before sliding it across the white tablecloth. "That amount weekly should address any scheduling concerns," he said smoothly, his tone making it clear the discussion was concluded. "Charlie needs someone who sees him." The Gallo mansion perched atop San Francisco's highest hill, its imposing stone walls and wrought iron gates keeping the outside world at bay while offering panoramic views of the city below. Audrey clutched her bag of teaching materials as the security detail scrutinized her ID with suspicious thoroughness. The interior revealed tasteful opulence, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and priceless artwork that spoke of old money rather than new wealth. Yet, despite its grandeur, the space felt hollow, as if beauty had been acquired without any real appreciation for what made a house a home. Charlie burst into the foyer when he heard the door, his small footsteps echoing against the marble as he raced toward Audrey with unrestrained joy. His hands moved quickly, signing about his day and how he'd been watching the clock since breakfast. Maxwell appeared moments later, his casual attire of designer jeans and a black button-down somehow more intimidating than his business suits. He watched their exchange with guarded interest, nodding a brisk greeting before leading them to a room that had been converted into a classroom. I've arranged for his other tutors to incorporate whatever you teach him, Maxwell explained, his tone businesslike as Charlie explored the educational materials Audrey had brought. They've been instructed to cooperate fully with your methods. The classroom walls displayed educational posters in both English and ASL, evidence that Maxwell had researched the subject thoroughly in the days since their restaurant encounter. Charlie proudly showed Audrey the new books on his shelf about deaf culture and sign language history. Has Charlie had his hearing tested recently? Audrey asked carefully, organizing flashcards on the table as the boy examined a picture dictionary she'd brought. There are excellent audiologists who specialize in children with varying levels of hearing loss. Maxwell's expression tightened, his hands clasping behind his back in a posture that spoke of contained tension. The doctors say his condition is permanent, damaged from a high fever when he was an infant, he replied, his voice carrying a hint of old guilt. I wasn't suggesting a cure, Audrey clarified gently, meeting his gaze directly despite the intimidating aura that surrounded him. But knowing exactly what he can hear helps tailor communication strategies to his specific needs. Charlie tugged at his father's sleeve, signing a question about whether he could show Audrey his room after the lesson. Maxwell nodded, his expression softening momentarily as he watched his son's excitement, a glimpse of the man beneath the fearsome reputation. He's never brought anyone to his room before? Maxwell observed quietly, something vulnerable flickering across his features before the mask of control returned. Not even his nanny is allowed past the doorway. The lesson progressed with Charlie's enthusiastic participation, his natural aptitude for language apparent, as he absorbed new signs with remarkable speed. Audrey introduced games that made learning feel like play, eliciting genuine laughter that echoed through the usually silent mansion. Maxwell remained in the doorway, ostensibly checking emails on his phone, but his attention was clearly fixed on the interaction before him. When Charlie correctly signed a complex sentence about his favorite book, the crime boss's expression betrayed a flash of parental pride. Most people in his life just speak louder, as if volume could breach the silence, Maxwell remarked during a brief break, watching his son arrange alphabet cards with intense concentration. They don't realize he's not missing anything. He just experiences the world differently. Charlie's bedroom revealed a mind yearning for connection. Walls covered with intricate drawings of hands forming different signs. Pictures cut from magazines with handwritten labels attached. A telescope pointed toward the city below, suggesting he spent hours observing a world that rarely noticed him back. He watches people, Maxwell explained as Charlie eagerly showed Audrey his collection of sketchbooks filled with detailed observations of human interaction. He studies their expressions, their body language, things most people miss because they're too busy listening to words. Audrey thumbed through the sketchbook, stunned by the emotional intelligence captured in childish drawings. Joy, deception, fear, longing, all documented with remarkable perception. These weren't the observations of a child cut off from the world, but one who saw it with heightened clarity. A bookshelf revealed volumes far beyond a typical 7-year-old's reading level, many focusing on astronomy, art, and human behavior. Charlie signed enthusiastically about the stars, explaining how he'd memorized constellations and the stories behind them from ancient mythologies. His mother was an astronomer, Maxwell said quietly, picking up a framed photograph of a smiling woman with Charlie's gentle eyes. She used to tell him that silence let her hear the stars better, their way of making his difference feel special. The walls also featured newspaper clippings about Maxwell's business holdings, carefully preserved but conspicuously edited. The more unsavory headlines about the Gallo family enterprises removed. Charlie was constructing his understanding of his father piece by sanitized piece. An expensive guitar sat untouched in one corner beside a piano keyboard gathering dust, evidence of conventional lessons abandoned. Yet, in striking contrast, a homemade drum set fashioned from buckets and containers showed signs of regular use, reminding Audrey that Charlie could feel vibrations even if he couldn't hear them. The music teachers gave up on him, Maxwell admitted, something like shame briefly crossing his features. They couldn't imagine teaching rhythm to someone who couldn't hear it, but he feels the pulse through the floor when I play old records. Charlie retrieved a small wooden box from under his bed, carefully opening it to reveal a collection of polished stones, each labeled with emotions. Happy, sad, angry, a tangible vocabulary he'd created for himself. He signed that he sometimes carried the stones in his pocket to communicate when no one understood his hands. The security team found him 2 miles from home last month, Maxwell revealed as Charlie arranged his stones in patterns only he understood. He'd left because his art tutor kept shouting instructions instead of demonstrating them, and he had no way to express his frustration. Audrey noticed a detailed map of San Francisco pinned to Charlie's wall with locations marked in a child's handwriting. Ice cream man who smiles, lady with dog who waves, park where no one stares. He had mapped kindness through a city that largely overlooked him. In the hallway outside Charlie's room, discreet cameras monitored every approach, a reminder that despite the warmth developing in this space, they existed in the shadow of Maxwell's dangerous world. The contrast between the father's ruthless reputation and his evident love for his son created an unsettling cognitive dissonance. Most of my associates don't know about Charlie's deafness, Maxwell confessed as they watched the boy organizing his books with methodical precision. In my world, any vulnerability can be exploited, and I have enemies who wouldn't hesitate to use a child to settle scores. Audrey understood the implications with chilling clarity. Her presence in their lives now carried risks beyond professional boundaries. She was gaining access to the most protected aspect of a dangerous man's existence: his love for his son. He needs more than just language, Audrey said finally, watching Charlie's careful movements with a growing sense of responsibility. He needs friends who understand him, a community where his way of communicating isn't exceptional but normal. The weeks that followed established a rhythm as Audrey's visits became the highlight of Charlie's days. His progress in sign language accelerating with each session. Maxwell frequently lingered during their lessons, his phone set aside as he absorbed the silent conversations unfolding before him. Audrey arrived one evening to find the mansion security doubled, grim-faced men with concealed weapons patrolling the perimeter with heightened vigilance. The tension in the air was palpable as she was escorted through 3 separate checkpoints before reaching the main house. Maxwell met her at the door himself, his usual composure fractured by subtle signs of stress, a muscle ticking in his jaw, shadows under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. "There's been a situation," he stated flatly, guiding her toward the study rather than Charlie's classroom. "Charlie doesn't know," he continued once the heavy doors closed behind them, pouring amber liquid into a crystal tumbler with controlled precision. "But there have been threats, specific ones, mentioning him by name." The study revealed Maxwell's true domain, walls lined with security monitors displaying every angle of the property, a desk containing multiple phones, and behind a false bookshelf, the outline of a safe large enough to hold significant secrets. This was the command center of his extensive operations. "I need to know if I can trust you," Maxwell said bluntly, his gaze intensely focused as he leaned against his desk. "Because right now, you're one of 3 people outside this house who knows about Charlie's deafness and has regular access to him." Audrey felt a chill race down her spine at the implication, suddenly aware of how deeply she had waded into dangerous waters. "I would never do anything to harm Charlie," she responded, maintaining eye contact despite her racing heart. The tension between them shifted subtly, the threat assessment in Maxwell's eyes giving way to something more complex as he studied her face for signs of deception. Their proximity in the dimly lit study created an unexpected intimacy, dangerous in its intensity. "I believe you," he said finally, surprising them both with the admission. "But these threats mean changes to security protocols. You'll be driven here directly from your apartment and back again. No stops, no deviations." Charlie burst into the study before Audrey could respond, his face lighting up at the sight of her as he signed rapidly about a book he'd been reading. The transformation in the boy over these weeks was remarkable, confidence replacing hesitation, expression replacing withdrawal. Maxwell watched their interaction with unconcealed fascination, something shifting in his expression as Charlie demonstrated an elaborate sign story he'd created. The formidable figure was seeing his son through new eyes, recognizing capabilities where he'd once perceived only limitations. "I've been learning," Maxwell admitted quietly, when Charlie left to retrieve his practice materials. "At night, after he's asleep, videos, books, anything I can find on sign language." He demonstrated a few basic signs with unexpected grace for hands more accustomed to violence. The revelation of this private effort, this powerful man humbling himself to enter his son's world, created a seismic shift in Audrey's perception. The monster of reputation was revealing himself as a father desperate to connect with his child. Their lesson was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Maxwell's right-hand man, Paul, who whispered urgently in his boss's ear. Maxwell's expression hardened instantly as he transformed back into the influential figure, all traces of the vulnerable father vanishing behind a mask of calculated control. "Stay with Charlie in his room until I come for you," Maxwell instructed, his tone leaving no room for questions as security personnel materialized in the doorway. "Paul will escort you upstairs. Don't leave for any reason." 3 hours passed with Audrey and Charlie sealed in his bedroom suite. The boy blissfully engrossed in their extended lesson while she fought to conceal her growing anxiety. The mansion had gone ominously quiet, the usual footsteps of security personnel absent from the hallway outside. When the door finally opened, Maxwell appeared different, his knuckles bruised, a small cut above his eye suggesting a violent confrontation. His eyes, however, held relief as they found Charlie safe and animated, showing Audrey his star chart with enthusiastic signs. "It's handled," he stated simply, the weight behind those words carrying implications Audrey didn't want to contemplate. "You'll stay here tonight. I've had a guest room prepared, and your sister has been informed you're working late." Audrey felt a surge of alarm at this orchestration of her life without her consent, yet the genuine concern in Maxwell's expression as he watched Charlie tempered her reaction. "My sister needs her medication at 9, she explained, torn between her responsibilities to her family and the silent boy who had come to rely on her. Maxwell pressed a phone into her hand, an unknown number already dialed. "Speak to her," he instructed, stepping away to give an illusion of privacy while remaining close enough to monitor the conversation. The voice that answered wasn't her sister's, but a woman who identified herself as a private nurse, explaining that she'd been hired to care for Amanda Bennett indefinitely. "Everything has been arranged, Miss Bennett," the nurse said smoothly. "Your sister is quite comfortable and asked me to tell you not to worry." The realization that Maxwell had investigated her life thoroughly enough to know about Amanda's condition, their financial struggles, and even their address sent a chill through Audrey's core. She had been naive to think she could maintain boundaries with a man who systematically dismantled them. "You can't just insert yourself into our lives," she confronted him after ensuring Charlie was occupied with his telescope. "Amanda is all I have. I need to see her to make sure she's okay." Maxwell's expression remained impassive, though something flickered behind his eyes. Perhaps respect for her boldness, where others would show only fear. "Tomorrow," he promised with surprising gentleness, "I'll have you both brought here after Charlie's morning lessons." Sleep proved elusive in the luxurious guest suite. Audrey's mind was racing with competing emotions, concern for her sister, uncertainty about her entanglement with the Gallo family, and increasingly confusion about her feelings toward Maxwell himself. The man's complexity defied simple categorization, brutal in business, yet tender with his son. Morning arrived with the scent of coffee and the sound of a helicopter landing on the mansion's private helipad, visible from her window. Maxwell stood on the lawn below, conferring with men in expensive suits, while occasionally glancing toward the house as if sensing her observation. Charlie appeared at her door, escorted by a housekeeper who signed a surprisingly fluent good morning before departing. The boy's excitement about having his teacher stay overnight was evident in his animated movements, his hands describing his plans for showing Audrey his favorite breakfast foods. The dining room revealed an elaborate spread that seemed excessive for a typical Thursday until Audrey realized this performance of normalcy was for Charlie's benefit. Maxwell entered with controlled composure, the evidence of last night's altercation carefully concealed beneath a fresh suit and expertly applied concealer. "Your sister will arrive in an hour," he informed her while serving Charlie pancakes shaped like stars, a paternal gesture so at odds with his fearsome reputation that it momentarily disarmed Audrey's prepared confrontation. "She's quite impressed with her new nurse." Amanda's arrival transformed the dynamic completely. Her wheelchair was expertly handled by the private nurse as she entered the mansion with wide-eyed wonder. Charlie immediately approached her with curious signs, instinctively recognizing a kindred spirit in navigating a world designed for others. "You didn't tell me you were working for Maxwell Gallo?" Amanda signed to Audrey with a mixture of awe and concern, her gaze taking in the obvious wealth surrounding them. "The same man who paid for my emergency surgery 2 years ago when our insurance denied coverage." The revelation hit Audrey like a physical impact, pieces suddenly clicking into terrible clarity. Why the hospital had found additional funding, why collection agencies had mysteriously stopped calling, why their landlord had suddenly become accommodating about late payments. Maxwell had been in their lives long before she'd served him at Bellini's. "I track potential assets," Maxwell explained with clinical detachment that failed to mask the intensity of his gaze. "People with useful skills, unusual talents, or exceptional character. You qualified on all counts when your sister's medical records crossed my desk." The calculated nature of their connection should have horrified Audrey, yet the genuine transformation in Charlie since she'd entered their lives complicated her response. The boy who once sat invisible in restaurant corners now animated the space. Between them, his hands forging connections where barriers should have stood. 2 years ago, you donated blood for a child with a rare blood type, Maxwell explained, his voice eerily calm while Charlie and Amanda were engaged in lively sign language across the room. "That child was my business partner's son, and your name remained in my records as a potential resource." Audrey felt the ground give way beneath her feet as years of what she thought were coincidences rearranged themselves into a pattern of calculated manipulation. "So, Bellini's wasn't a coincidence," she stated, the question almost rhetorical as the truth became shockingly clear. "You engineered our meeting." Maxwell's expression remained unreadable as he watched Charlie demonstrate signs to Amanda, who responded with the effortless ease of someone who had lived in silence. "I plan to offer you a job," he admitted. "I never anticipated that you would so completely transform my son's world." A deafening crash interrupted their tense conversation as windows shattered on the mansion's first floor, and men in tactical gear poured through the broken glass with military precision. Maxwell reacted instantly, shoving Audrey toward a hidden panel in the wall that slid open at his touch. "Get Charlie and Amanda into the safe room," he commanded, pressing a small key into her palm before drawing a weapon from beneath his jacket. "The code is his birthday. Do not open the door for anyone but me, no matter what you hear." The hidden passage led to a fortified chamber deep within the mansion's core, a testament to the paranoia of someone who had made a lot of deadly enemies. Charlie's eyes were wide with fear as Audrey sealed them inside. The heavy door closed with an airtight finality. Amanda's nurse revealed unexpected training, efficiently checking the room's security systems and medical supplies while reassuring Charlie with her hands. "Mr. Gallo hired me as much for my combat medic experience as for my nursing degree," she explained in response to Audrey's questioning look. The security feeds displayed on monitors embedded in the wall showed the intense conflict unfolding throughout the mansion. Maxwell's security team engaged in fierce skirmishes with the intruders, while Maxwell himself moved with lethal efficiency through his home. The cold, calculated precision of his actions confirmed all the rumors about his shadowy past. Charlie pressed his palm against the monitor, tracing his father's movements with a mixture of fear and fascination, his world expanding beyond the carefully sanitized version he'd been allowed to experience. The muffled vibrations of explosions traveled through the walls, his body registering danger his ears couldn't hear. Amanda wheeled closer to the boy, sharing a silent understanding that only those who navigated the world differently could fully grasp. Her hands formed gentle reassurances, creating a pocket of calm amid the chaos through the language of movement that had always been Charlie's way of understanding the world. The nurse accessed a secondary panel, revealing a cache of emergency supplies, including a satellite phone that couldn't be traced to Gallo's networks. "He anticipated every scenario," she explained, her efficiency unwavering as she monitored both the security feeds and Charlie's emotional state with professional precision. A message flashed across one of the monitors. Coordinates and extraction protocols from Maxwell's security chief, indicating that contingency plans were being activated across the city. Audrey realized the extent of the preparation behind Maxwell's seemingly impulsive decision to bring her into their lives, making her question the role of fate versus calculation. Charlie watched the screens with a complex mixture of horror and fascination as his father transformed before his eyes, from a protective parent into a ruthless enforcer. His hands formed a single, heartbreaking question directed at Audrey. "Is my father a bad man?" Before she could formulate a response that balanced truth with compassion, the feed showed Maxwell cornered by 3 armed men, his weapon kicked away as they forced him to his knees. The lead attacker spoke directly to the camera, as if knowing they were watching. "We want the boy and the documents," the man announced, pressing his gun against Maxwell's temple. "You have 30 minutes before we execute Gallo and burn this place to the ground. Your choice, Miss Bennett." Charlie's hands trembled as he signed frantically, begging Audrey to help his father, despite the danger. The boy's love was uncomplicated by the moral complexities that plagued the adults. He saw only his father in peril, not the criminal whose actions had brought this violence upon them. Amanda gripped Audrey's hand with surprising strength, her expression resolute. "Whatever he's done, he saved my life, and he loves his son," she signed, her gaze unwavering. "Sometimes good people make terrible choices for the right reasons." The nurse accessed a hidden compartment revealing emergency protocols and a secure phone. "There's a secondary extraction team on standby," she explained, her professional demeanor never faltering. "But they won't move without direct authorization from either Mr. Gallo or the holder of the safe room key." Audrey felt the weight of the key in her palm. Maxwell had literally placed his son's safety and his own life in her hands, an act of trust that went beyond their complicated history. The timer on the screen counted down mercilessly as 3 lives hung in the balance of her decision. "I need 5 minutes alone with Charlie," Audrey decided, guiding the frightened boy to a corner of the safe room away from the monitors. His small hands shook as he signed questions about his father, his usual confidence replaced by the vulnerability of a child facing potential loss. With gentle precision, Audrey taught Charlie an emergency sign sequence, one that would appear meaningless to observers, but would signal specific instructions to his father. The boy practiced repeatedly, his determination to save his father overcoming his fear. "Your father understands more signs than he lets on," Audrey explained, wiping away Charlie's tears with tender reassurance. "He's been studying every night to connect with you. Now that connection might save both of you." The extraction plan came together with tense efficiency. Amanda would be evacuated through a secondary exit with the nurse, while Audrey would accompany Charlie to the main hall under the pretense of surrender. The boy's courage never faltered as they prepared, his trust in Audrey absolute. When they emerged from a hidden entrance near the grand staircase, the attackers immediately surrounded them, weapons trained on Charlie with sickening intent. Maxwell's expression shifted from defeat to alarm as he saw his son enter the danger zone. "I brought what you wanted," Audrey announced with forced calm, her arm protectively around Charlie's shoulders. "Now let Mr. Gallo call off his reinforcements before they storm the perimeter. You're surrounded, and only he can prevent your deaths." The leader hesitated, greed warring with suspicion as he assessed the waitress, who was showing unexpected strategic thinking. He pressed his weapon harder against Maxwell's head, demanding verification of her claims about backup forces. While their attention was focused on this negotiation, Charlie positioned himself in his father's line of sight and began signing, not a panicked plea, but the precise emergency sequence Audrey had taught him. Maxwell's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as he recognized the silent message. "Check the security feeds." The leader barked an order at one of his men, momentarily distracted by Maxwell's too calm demeanor. "Make sure this isn't a bluff before we—" Maxwell exploded into action with predatory speed, using the split second of distraction to disarm the man beside him while simultaneously shielding Charlie with his body. The practiced movements revealed years of combat training hidden beneath the veneer of business legitimacy. The mansion erupted into chaos as hidden security personnel emerged from concealed positions, and the extraction team Audrey had activated converged on their location with tactical precision. She pulled Charlie behind an overturned table as gunfire erupted around them. Through the smoke and confusion, Maxwell fought his way to them, his focus entirely on his son's safety rather than pursuing the fleeing attackers. Blood streamed from a wound in his shoulder, but his expression showed only relief as he gathered Charlie into his arms. "You trusted me with your son?" Audrey said as they huddled behind their makeshift barricade, the wail of emergency services growing louder in the distance. "Despite everything you've done, everything you are, that one decision redeems more than you know." Maxwell's gaze met hers with unexpected vulnerability. The carefully constructed walls of the feared figure temporarily lowered in the aftermath of near-devastating loss. "My enemies came because they discovered something I've been hiding for months," he admitted, still clutching Charlie protectively. First responders swarmed the property, their flashing lights painting the smoke-filled rooms in surreal pulses of red and blue. Charlie's hands moved with remarkable composure as he signed to the paramedic examining his father's wound, serving as an interpreter between two worlds with newfound confidence. Maxwell winced as the antiseptic touched raw flesh, his eyes never leaving the security perimeter, where his men maintained vigilant watch. "There will be retribution," he stated with cold certainty, the business strategist calculating losses while the father processed how close he'd come to losing everything that mattered. Audrey intercepted a call from her sister's nurse, confirming that Amanda had reached the secondary safe house unharmed. The intricate safety net Maxwell had constructed around not just his son but her family too, revealed planning that extended months beyond their first meeting at Bellini's. The mansion's east wing erupted in a controlled detonation, destroying evidence that could never reach authorities, regardless of Maxwell's new direction. His redemption had carefully drawn boundaries, a cooperation that protected his son's future while preserving enough leverage to ensure their safety from those beyond the reach of the law. As the smoke cleared from the ravaged mansion, Maxwell revealed the truth. He had been systematically dismantling his criminal enterprises, converting assets to legitimate businesses, and gathering evidence against former associates. The documents the attackers sought would have exposed his withdrawal from the underworld, making him a target for those who feared his testimony. 6 months later, Bellini's Fine Dining hosted a private celebration under new ownership. Maxwell Gallo's name wasn't on any of the paperwork, but his influence was evident in the elegant renovations and enhanced security. The restaurant had been transformed, much like the man himself. Audrey moved between tables with practiced grace, no longer a waitress but the event coordinator for the restaurant's grand reopening. Her nursing textbooks had been replaced by business management courses, her career path redirected by opportunities that no longer felt like manipulation. Charlie greeted arriving guests with confident signs and spoken words, his communication skills having flourished under the guidance of specialists from the prestigious school where he was now enrolled. His father watched with undisguised pride as the boy navigated social interactions that once would have terrified him. Maxwell's transformation had shocked San Francisco's business community. The man with a notorious reputation was now reinvented as a legitimate entrepreneur, focusing on accessibility initiatives and education reform. His testimony had sent several dangerous criminals to prison, while careful negotiation with authorities had secured his own immunity. "He still frightens half the city," Amanda observed from her position at the piano, her musical therapy program now fully funded by the Gallo Foundation. But fear based on respect is different from fear based on violence. The security personnel remained, their presence more discreet but no less vigilant. Old enemies didn't disappear with legal paperwork, and Maxwell took no chances with his son's safety. His protective instincts remained unchanged, even as his methods evolved toward legitimacy. Charlie had developed an unexpected talent for public speaking. His unique perspective as a deaf child in a hearing world made him a powerful advocate for inclusive education. His father made sure every presentation had proper interpretation services, attending each event with visible support. "The prosecutors wanted my criminal network," Maxwell explained quietly to Audrey as they watched Charlie demonstrate sign language to interested guests. "I gave them something more valuable, a blueprint for dismantling similar operations nationwide." Audrey's sister had become an integral part of their unusual family configuration, her artistic talents finding expression through programs Maxwell funded at local schools. The boundaries between professional obligation and personal connection had long since blurred into something neither of them had anticipated. The fundraising gala had attracted San Francisco's elite, many curious about Maxwell Gallo's transformation from feared crime lord to philanthropist focusing on accessibility initiatives. Former associates watched with wary calculation, while new allies approached with cautious optimism, the room a chessboard of shifting alliances. Charlie had developed an unexpected talent for photography, his perspective capturing human connection with remarkable sensitivity. His images lined the restaurant walls, hands communicating in various forms, faces expressing without words, creating a visual poetry that transcended conventional language. Maxwell maintained certain connections from his previous life, repurposed now for intelligence rather than intimidation. The security detail protecting the event included former enemies now employed through legitimate channels, their skills redirected toward preservation rather than destruction. Audrey caught Maxwell watching her across the room, his expression containing something that still surprised her. Vulnerability beneath strength, a tenderness capable of coexisting with necessary hardness. Their unlikely journey had created something neither had expected to find in the wreckage of his former empire. Sanctuary. You never did answer Charlie's question that day in the safe room, Maxwell noted, his gaze thoughtful as he observed his son's animated conversation across the room. About whether I'm a bad man. Audrey considered the complexity of the man beside her. The ruthless magnate who had built his domain on strategic power, the father who would sacrifice everything for his son, the man who had funded her sister's medical care without recognition. I told him you were a good man who made bad choices, she replied honestly. And now? He asked, uncharacteristic uncertainty in his voice as he turned to face her directly. The question contained multitudes about redemption, about forgiveness, about possibilities neither had allowed themselves to consider during those first tense encounters. In response, Audrey's hands formed fluid signs that needed no verbal translation, her expression conveying everything her words might have failed to capture. Maxwell's fingers interlaced with hers, their complicated journey crystallized in that simple connection. Charlie bounded over to them with characteristic enthusiasm, proudly introducing them to his new teacher from the school for the deaf. The woman signed her congratulations about the restaurant's success, adding with knowing eyes that she'd heard their remarkable story from multiple sources. People say we're an unlikely family. Charlie signed with innocent wisdom beyond his years. But Dad says family isn't about matching appearances or histories. It's about who remains when the world goes silent. As the evening light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting prismatic patterns across the gathered crowd, Audrey reflected on the strange alchemy that had transformed their lives. How a simple act of communication in a restaurant had created ripples that ultimately changed not just one child's world, but an entire complex enterprise.